Dalton, a game at noon that you and I, so we were on the field for the first half, so we were not really watching the game, obviously, in the first half, but we got up in the second half, we're watching a little bit. We were like, every time we looked at the scoreboard, we're like, what's going on in that game right now? Number 16, Indiana, absolutely destroyed Nebraska. 56-7. They beat Nebraska in what was, that we billed it as, Indiana's first real test of the year. Yeah, they passed it with flying colors in that game. Indiana destroyed Nebraska 56-7, beating them by 49 points, beating them by 7 touchdowns. Let's go over the highest grade players, starting off with the Indiana Hoosiers. The highest grade player is actually Kurt Cignetti for being just an unbelievable coach. But let's go over...
Google him.
Yeah, Google him. Let's go over some other players, though. Trey Wiegelig, the offensive tackle, 79.5. Miles Cross, the wide receiver, 79.3. Taven Jackson, the backup quarterback, 78.5, because Curtis Rourke got hurt, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But Mikhail Kamara, edge defender, 78.1. James Carpenter, 76.7. And then Curtis Rourke, like I mentioned, 81.7 grade. He actually was the highest grade player for Indiana. Let's go over to Nebraska, though, with their highest graded players in this game. Thomas Fedone, the second, the tight end, 78.6. Jalen Lloyd, the wide receiver, 76.9. Makai Gebayer at a 76, the linebacker. Malcolm Hartzog, the corner, at a 74.8. Isaac Gifford, safety, 73.7. And Dylan Raiola, the quarterback, with a 54.2 grade. Dawn, what for you was the stat that told the story in this amazing Indiana victory?
So it was almost hard to find just one, because it's really all of them, right? It's like okay, they just, when you win a game 56-7, it's everything. But the biggest question, first of all, the biggest question I had on Indiana coming into the year, right? We figured they were talented. We both had them making a bowl game. We were like, this is kind of an underrated team, right? But the biggest question I had was the trench play, right? Could they put it together? Could those James Madison guys, like Kamara up front, could those guys come in and play at a Big Ten level? Was the offensive line, that looked like the weakest part to me, at least in the preseason, where I go, okay, this is the part I question the most, right? Their trench play dominated this game, and they dominated as a team. But look, their offensive line had an 89.9 pass pro grade and only allowed 4 pressures, all of them hurries, 72 run blocking grade. They ran the living hell out of the ball on Nebraska. That was the most surprising thing to me, is I go, okay, if Nebraska can stop the run, get them out of the RPOs, get them in obvious passing situations, Indiana hasn't been challenged like that yet this year. Well, they still haven't, because they were averaging 7 yards a carry, and they ran for 5 touchdowns and 2.5 yards before contact per attempt. That's pretty good. I mean, then I go to their defensive line. 17 pressures, pressured Raiola over 35% of the time. Solid run defense grade. Nebraska only had 82 yards on the ground. Indiana, the trench play was actually the biggest thing as they got into their harder games against Nebraska, against Michigan, of course, with their D-line, against Ohio State later, right? That was the part to me where I go, okay, I can see you're skilled. We can see that. Your receiving core is loaded. Curtis Rourke's really good. Guys like D'Angelo Pons on the back end, you got some athletes. I knew they had athletes. I was like, this is the game where we're going to find out Nebraska's huge. I mean, especially on D-line, guys
they beat Colorado for being huge.
Right. They beat Colorado because they were clearly bigger than them. And they beat several teams like, they beat Rutgers. What was it? Did they shut out Rutgers, or was it 14-7? Where Rutgers is a super physical team, and they out-physicaled them. Nebraska's a really physical football team, and Indiana just mauled them on the inside on both sides of the ball. No, this trench play, this level of trench play from Indiana, and Curtis Rourke, obviously, you'd like to see him. I think it was some sort of hand or thumb injury when he followed through and hit a defensive lineman on the arm, and hopefully it's not something bad, and they can get through. If they get through to the Michigan and the Ohio State game still undefeated, you got a thing here, because if they're going to play like this in the trenches, this is not just like, a fun, maybe dark horse playoff contender. This is actually maybe one of the 12 best teams in the country.
No, they're a playoff contender.
It is insane how good they were in the trenches in this game. And if that and they're, again, same thing with their offense especially. There was no tricks here. No. This was not, they weren't running Statue of Liberties and double reverses and doing all. They lined up and they ran their offense, and they in the trenches beat the living crap out of Nebraska. Yeah. And this is what they've been doing. They did the same thing to Nebraska that they did to UCLA and FIU and every other team that they played that everybody called soft. Indiana, right? We have to look at them as just, okay, they're that good.
No, they proved it.
They're one of the best teams in the country. They're well-rounded. And the biggest question for me, for Indiana, got answered in this game on each side of the ball in the trenches. They're going to be hard to beat.
Yep.
As well as they execute and as talented as they are. This is a really good football team.
Honestly, Dalton, we were high on them going into it in our preview of them. We were not this high, though. We can't even take credit for that. We were like, oh, like their win total, I think, was 5.5 after going 3-9 last year. We're like, no, this team is too talented to not make a bowl game.
I was figuring like, okay, you know what? When I ran through this schedule, I think I had them at like 8-4.
Yeah, I was like
okay,
7-5.
They're going to be solid. They have a lot of talent.
Yeah,
but this is
not playoff. We didn't think playoff.
This is ridiculous.
We didn't think playoff, but we're like, oh, they'll go 7-5, 8-4. So take the over on the win total. So we were kind of right about them, but we weren't this right about them, honestly, because they are unbelievable. This is a beatdown, so I just want to illustrate how big of a beatdown this was. Indiana doubled Nebraska in terms of yards per play in this game. 7.8 yards per play for Indiana. Nebraska had 3.9 yards per play. Indiana, 0.437 EPA per play. Nebraska, negative 0.336 EPA per play. 82.5 offensive grade for Indiana. 56.1 offensive grade for Nebraska. 83.1 defensive grade for Indiana. 58.6 defensive grade for Nebraska. 1 turnover for Indiana. 5 turnovers for Nebraska. Just a good old-fashioned whooping that Indiana put on Nebraska in every imaginable way. And Dalton, Indiana's a legit playoff contender. Like I said, the first real test of the season, they passed it with flying colors. Even if they lose to Ohio State, they're in the playoff. They got Washington, Michigan State, Michigan, and Purdue. If they win those 4 games at 11-1, they are in the playoff, no matter basically whatever happens. So if they could beat Michigan and obviously beat Washington as well, I feel really good about their chances to get in, and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. Maybe if they lose to Ohio State and then go to the Big Ten title game and lose again and have 2 losses, maybe there's more of a. I don't know.
I wouldn't even buy because it's going to be either at that point it'll be
11-2,
Oregon or Penn State, right? I mean, well, and that implies that Ohio State's losing a different game, which that shouldn't happen. But
Penn State, I don't know.
Well, I guess you make a point. Penn State, and well, they got to get over the Michigan hurdle too, even for as much as Michigan is struggling. But no, Indiana. I mean, look, playoff contender, Big Ten contender. If they're 11-1, it's a wrap. They have to be in. If they're 11-1 with a loss to at Ohio State.
Yeah,
and dominating the way they dominated this game is a big selling point. Yep. It's going to be because Nebraska is a good team.
Absolutely. So what for you is the most impressive part of this Indiana victory?
I'm just going to hand it to Kurt Cignetti. To me, there's not one singular thing that you can point to with this part. It's just the amount. I think the trench play was obviously something I already went over, but the amount that this game could have been the difference in their season, right? Like going into it, we were like, okay, Nebraska's good. Indiana we think is good, but we're not entirely sure, but we're pretty sure. This could have been a close game. This could have been the game that we go, okay, Nebraska could have won. Okay, Indiana's not real. This could, at home, sold-out crowd, all the pressure really on Indiana to be the ones to prove that they're good, and none of it mattered. They just went out there. They went out there and they played the same football game that they did their first 6 or 7. That's incredible stuff from Kurt Cignetti. I mean, to keep that team that level-headed through all of this, through all of a sudden having expectations, he's just gonna. It feels like they're just gonna keep doing this. Maybe not 56-7, but they're gonna keep winning every week.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, we have kind of breaking news about Indiana that I just looked up. Pete Thamwich tweeted us out. Curtis Rourke is expected to miss the Washington game with that thumb injury, and maybe more. So, how do you feel about them in that? Because that Washington game's not easy, right? And now Taven Jackson confirmed to be the starting quarterback for that game. Are you a little worried about the Hoosiers right now with the back quarterback against Washington, or how do you feel?
Not as worried as I'd be for most teams. I think, one, because we saw Taven Jackson come in the second half of this game, and he played well. You see right there, he was their 3rd or 4th highest graded player, right? And it's an offense that is executing so well at all levels and with all 11 players. And Washington, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, Washington's pretty good. We saw them beat Michigan. Will Rogers is decent. Jonah Coleman's a problem, right? Run defense. This Indiana team is not built off one guy and not just built off their quarterback. This is not just Curtis Rourke carrying this team every week. This is a 22 or plus special teams. This is however many guys that they use on this roster to win games. This is a team effort. And the level that they execute on offense. And their offense, again, it's not some tricky offense like that's so complex that you need 5 years of experience to run it. They run simple stuff, and they just execute it as well as any team in the country. I think Taven Jackson can come in and win the Washington game. Then you get a bye week, and then you see which one you can go with for the Michigan game after that. That'll be the big one where I'm like, okay, maybe I want Curtis Rourke back against Michigan. But No, I think they could beat Washington with Taven Jackson. Absolutely.
So it's not a bye week. They have Michigan State after
it's
that.
Michigan State and then Michigan?
Yeah.
Did I count it wrong? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, no,
I don't know if you counted Michigan State as a bye week for a second. The Spartans have
no, because I thought so they don't have. I thought they had a bye week in between.
It's Washington, then Michigan State, then Michigan, and then a bye week.
And then a bye. Okay, I had the bye week off. I knew it was in there somewhere, but no. Well, I mean, okay, so even then. Obviously, if I feel like they can beat Washington,
they can beat Michigan State.
They can beat Michigan State with Taven Jackson.
Yeah,
I don't. That's not a question.
It's really November 9th. He's got to get back by.
Yeah. So I think they could absolutely, the way their offense runs and the way they've been executing, they can absolutely win the next 2 games with Jackson. And then we start talking about the Michigan game and seeing where it goes and how he looks for 2 full games as opposed to a half where they were already up by 3 scores in this one.
Yeah. So Curtis Rourke, like I said, PFF reported Curtis Rourke expected to miss this next game against Washington, maybe more than that with that thumb injury. We'll see what happens for him. Hopefully, gets healthy soon. My most impressive part, though, was Indiana's coverage unit. We mentioned in the preview, Raiola 5th in the nation in passing grade against zone coverage, and Indiana runs zone coverage at one of the highest rates in college football. That, to me, was the biggest reason why I picked Nebraska to win this game, and boy, was I wrong, because in theory, like I said, that favored Indiana, that theory was disproven in this game. 82.4 coverage grade, 3 interceptions, 3 forced incompletions, 46.5 passer rating allowed, 62.8% adjusted completion rate for Dylan Raiola as well. Only 4 of Raiola's passes were dropped or were off target. They were just locked down in coverage, honestly. So he was not horrible, Dylan Raiola. I mean, there was a few bad interceptions, obviously, but I thought Indiana's coverage unit was not giving him any avenues to throw that football, and they were really, really impressive with their zone coverage and ran a little man, too, in that game. I was really impressed with Indiana's coverage unit when I thought that was really the reason why I was picking Nebraska to win this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a struggle all the way around for Nebraska, no question, and you know, this is one of the tapes for Nebraska where they're going to maybe watch it once and toss it, because that's just Indiana executed at such a high level in this game that I don't know if anybody could have beaten them yesterday, honestly.